Woohoo.
All right, we're all set, right?
Mhm.
All right.
Okay, bye. Sorry, I missed it.
All right, well, welcome everybody. This is our fifth and final focus group meeting for the Sandy Creek 9-element watershed management plan. This one is, we'll focus in on agricultural and large landowners. We don't have a lot of different people, so don't be afraid to open up the discussion. If we have some questions here that make us think about answers to, but if someone has something more specific, feel free to get going. I think there's nothing new online, right?
No.
And Doug, so we're not.
Where's Rick Roberts from?
Adams.
Okay.
Yeah, but we've, everybody in here already knows who we are.
Sorry.
We're gonna cut that down. Right, so well, Eric was in the back. Yeah, he's actually working.
Oh.
She works for a senior town.
Okay.
Yep. So let's just jump right in. Question one, Doug, how do you use the Sandy Creek watershed, land and water resources now with your agriculture? What do you do to actually protect water quality, and what maybe you do or maybe you don't do to impact?
Well, I think, from my perspective, and it's getting to be much broader than your horizon. I tell the story when I grew up, when I was a little kid, before we moved to the current place we are, we had a shop or a garage building and fuel tanks. And I remember the oil used to get dumped out at the end of the garage, and it kept the burdocks from growing. And I'm sure we weren't unique in that, and you just don't see that, type of thing in agriculture. We're regulated, we're watched over, we're with by several agencies, we do everything we can from manure injection and prescribed rates to cover crops, no-till, those sorts of things. We've got some buffer strips along waterways to give filtration if there is runoff with water. We never have runoff with manure. I don't think, compared to what we used to do years ago, we're certainly far ahead of where we were from an environmental standpoint. So,
Anybody online as a landowner have anything that they've seen in the watershed, how they use the resource, or any impacts that they've done, or things they're doing to improve their water?
I think that the no-till option is certainly, a great option to look at for even the smaller agricultural plots. And, we're doing that up at our piece of property as well too. And, I think it's certainly important that we, even as small as what we have available for crop production, that it's important that we look at those options.
Yep. I'll speak for forestry, and I know Joe will throw some stuff in for forestry, because this isn't just ag, it's forestry as well. Obviously, we use those forestry resources to protect water. The cleanest water in the world, you've heard me say it again, this is from research, I can pull the paper. It comes from a forested ecosystem. So we need to keep those resources protected. And in forestry, we have this thing called the green lye. And what that is, it looks like a forest, it smells like a forest. But the truth is, a lot of it ecologically isn't the species composition that should be there or was there. And that's because of some not so perfect forest practices. So I know I see a lot of forestry work that really probably wasn't well thought through. Someone mentioned it earlier meeting. I do see clear cuts. There's nothing wrong with clear cut if it's done correctly. It's a great silviculture option, but you got to make sure you get regeneration. You get regeneration of the species you want. Oftentimes we'll see it come back as goldenrod or striped maple or fern because they didn't take those deliberate steps to get regeneration, and that can impact your watershed in a big hurry. We know that anytime we do a harvest, we have huge decomposition within 3 to 5 years after the harvest, which increases nitrogen and phosphorus loads through the stream. We know that's gonna happen. So you hear me talk about buffers. Buffers are crucial from the headwaters all the way to the lake shore. And those buffers help suck up that nitrogen and phosphorus, and we have to do that same buffer in our forested woodlots. So,
I think the other things that impact forestry standpoint would be maybe lack of bridges or rough timing of the year. Those all need to be well planned out. That's where forester can come in, management plan, those sorts of things. But either way, there are resources out there like the state veterinary practice list. You can get that right online. District or other agency, get some information on that. But there are plenty of offers of doing a step back for skid trails, well thought out skid trails, landings, things of that nature. Leave space, step back from certain regulatory features or just water features in general.
anybody else got anything? Anybody in the room got anything else about how they use the watershed, anything to do with forestry or ag or large land use in the areas? All right.
I have a question.
Yep.
You were just talking about clear cuts, and obviously there's nothing wrong with those if they're done correctly. It just struck me based on our last conversation, how does the SWIP program come into play with clear cuts?
Yep, as long as it's a that's a great question. As long as it's a silviculturally planned harvest, then you're exempt from SWIP.
And what does that mean, silviculturally planned?
Well, it means that if you were asked by the DEC and you were able to articulate silviculturally what you're doing in even age regeneration method, and you're trying to regenerate shade intolerant species like black cherry and white ash, and this is what I did, then that would be an acceptable practice. If they wanted to monitor and you didn't have someone that could answer those questions correctly, then they certainly would have an argument that it was that you disturbed over 5 acres of land without a permit.
If you take that same clear cut and you start rubbing the stumps out, bulldozing and put up a pole barn, that changes. So if you stick with a silviculture regeneration.
But we still have to have follow-up and enforcement by the DEC, correct?
Yep, that's exactly. Yep, or somebody in the public sees it and brings it to the DEC's so they see what's going on. Because like what Joe just said, another great one of the if we clear a wood lot and even if I cleared the wood lot and we didn't pull the stumps because they felt they could put their solar panels up without pulling the stumps, that's not silviculture, that's land clearing, and that would require some sort of SWIP. If they pulled the stumps, it's even worse. So, yep, it'd be a DEC oversight.
One question.
Yeah.
This is like, I don't know, Doug. So any agricultural land cover, land use is regulated, or is it a certain size? Certain size farm?
Basically, we're regulated. Larger animal operations are regulated under strict animal breeding permit. And, so we have to have planners and plans and, follow those and have an inspection of our facilities every 3 years, those sort of things. Smaller farms, I don't know, what, 100, 200, 300 cows?
I think it's 300 now.
300 cows and under aren't nearly as regulated. There is some limited oversight there, but not nearly as much. And if you get, I think it's under 100 cows, there's almost none.
Yep. We'll jump on to question 2. How have water quality and land use changed within the watershed over the last 15 years? What would you do?
Was it changed? One of the things you bring up, size difference. And when we had a lot of under cow farms, they typically let their cows out every day. They go out maybe into a small exercise yard or pasture. But typically barns were built along streams. And barnyards were next to the barn were not paved, they were not cared for, they were typically mud holes, crap, whatever you want to call them. And a lot of those ended up running right into the stream. Today, most of your animals are in confinement, so you're controlling not only the runoff, but you're controlling their environment so that they're kept cool, those sorts of things. So there's lots of that, certainly, in our own situation, we started using prescribed manure application and year-round storage in 1978. Not everybody did. We had a neighbor whose farm we're working now. He had a low spot that he couldn't plant through. So he spread his manure on 2 acres all summer long. And, that was only a few hundred yards from a trout stream. It was dry when he did it, but there was still excessive nutrients there. We can grow a heck of a crop there. But, and those, anecdotally, those are some of the things that have changed. More of the agricultural land and agricultural operations are using good practices, better practices, rather, in our own case, not only are we using no-till, but we're using cover crop. We try to keep, something growing on the ground all year long. Typically we chop corn silage within 48 hours. We're in there no-till and in a cover crop. So there's a lot of that. I really see, a lot less runoff. Of course, phosphorus we're controlling very heavily. And the price of nutrients today, nobody wants to waste them and let them wash away. So we're trying to do all of that.
Anybody online have anything to add to the how water quality or how their watershed has changed in the past 15 years?
Doug, I just have a question. Are you a CAFO farm?
Yes.
Okay.
What is the change in, I guess, the number of people versus small farms? Like, how has that changed, do you think?
There's getting to be more consolidation. As far as numbers, I'm sure that smaller farms have diminished. Larger farms have held their own or maybe perhaps grown, and certainly larger are getting larger in cases.
Yeah, I would say that for sure. I grew up on right here in Sandy Creek, and there were 12 farms, but we're not talking 15 years, we're talking 40 years. We went from 12 farms to 1, but it's consolidated. Still the same. I wouldn't say there's more ag land. I totally agree with Doug on. I can think back to those. Maybe somebody in this room's dad had a farm like that, but they always build them right by streams, and the barnyards were always bunch full of holes, and a lot of nutrients ended up right in those creeks. But that the North Ridge Dairy over there is a state-of-the-art complex.
How long have these sort of regulations been at play, do you think? I guess the real question is, do you think that, legacy nutrient loading from past practices is still contributing, the water quality issue today, where, it's still kind of being flushed out?
I wouldn't say legacy. I think, your most noble nutrients are nitrogen and phosphorus, and they move relatively quick with water. So past things work themselves out fairly quickly if they're managed right. So, typically crop production is yielding significantly more than it has in the past. So it's using more and more of those nutrients. Part of that is because we're doing a better job with the soil and capturing what we're applying.
I would say for forestry, the whole idea of cogen plants and the use of chippers to utilize a lot more forest product than in the past. There's been research on this, there's a lot less down course woody debris in our forest now than what there was, and that's a bad thing. To have down course woody debris. So, on the other hand, where I see those chipper operations going on, they are removing a lot of the junk stuff that, so just leaving it behind, which isn't helping us at all. So I've seen a lot of that has changed, a lot more mechanized logging, bigger jobs. As far as the whole, more or less, biomass and carbon, Colin Byer, DSF is working on that right now. And Joe and I sat and watched it here this last week, and pretty quick, they've got Landstat and they've got other aerial programs that they're going to be able to tell you exactly what's going on from gaming and moving. What you think?
I think this is bigger equipment, and that I think that the soils and water erosion, but that is, you have to use a lot of care in a lot of places to get them to be and back and utilize those. That are, the state website and anything newly developed to minimize it. It is much bigger.
Do you think in forestry that part of our issues may be that we have smaller tracts of land, we have smaller companies that are harvesting? I know there's a lot of new technology in the forestry industry as far as harvest machines and that sort of thing that will impact the environment a lot less. And so I just wonder if that is a part of our issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's parcelization. I mean, this watershed, I told you, was 245,000 acres, and roughly 12,000 parcels. So that's 20 acres of parcel average.
Yeah.
It's really smaller than that in the end, because there's some big holdings in there, otherwise the state owns some big chunks. So, and yeah, that it definitely impacts. I do see landowners, well, it's one or the other. Either they don't want that big equipment on the land, so it doesn't get harvested at all, which isn't, it's not bad. Depends on what's there. Or they go in and they have to take the entire 15 acres because it's not feasible to move in all that expensive equipment. Has anybody got anything online with question number 2 on how that land use has changed over the past 15 years in their watershed?
One other thing I'm seeing is as we have stopped pasturing animals along streams, and brought the animals back into the barns, a lot of those streams are getting choked off by vegetation now, and they're moving. And, I gotta believe when they're moving a lot of soil with them, and it makes it very difficult to farm with them, or, even to put in buffer strips because they're always moving. Yeah, because they're getting choked off by the vegetation, Yeah.
That's a good point.
And I think, I've heard DEC talk about the wetlands down here, wildlife area, same impact where they're just getting choked off. So they have to go in and do channeling and that sort of thing.
Are they choked off with invasives, would you say? Or is it
No,
things like Japanese coffee?
it's a lot of it. It's native, canary grass, some of those sorts of things, some weeds.
It could be partially a function. I'm thinking of one we talked about is, well, you've been there forever. Was that the one that we talked about potentially doing riparian forest buffer? Was that ever forested along there?
No.
Okay. Yep. I'm just so, in some of them, I can see that if they opened it up and they let the sunlight in, it might have changed.
Well, and I wonder if that is an impact on our water flow and our resilience. We talk about it being nice that that's going to filter the water, but it also changes the dynamics, just like you talked about at the bridge. Of the water flow and how quickly it can move off, and does it back it up to a point, and then it overtakes whatever's there, and we get a bigger surge.
Right.
The type of vegetation within that riparian zone is going to be
And the challenge is the regulations that, we try to live within the regulations, and the regulations say, you can't do certain things, so nothing happens. We don't maintain the vegetation, you just let it grow.
Yeah, because you can't.
And you can't really get in to clip it or, slow it down or anything with that stuff. Challenge.
Anything else online? All
I
right,
think tiling has become more prominent of the farmers' fields, and I think that certainly changed the hydraulics, I would believe, and maybe has some of the effect on the runoff as well too, depending on where the tiles channeled to.
it's a good point. That's a good point. Do you think there's more
What's that?
tiling?
There's some more tiling, but, I could argue the other way that if you get the tiling in, then you have less ponding. You more organized movement of the water out of that territory. You don't get the overtop flow where you get sedimentation and that sort of thing as much. So.
Yeah. All right, let's go to 3. Looking ahead 15 years in that crystal ball. What do we see as our watershed challenges going with agriculture?
I think a lot of the same things, I think there's going to be more challenges on quality sources, for farm use, for community use, those sorts of things. Sources, volume of sources in a lot of cases. Without you can tap into the aquifer, you're really limited by a lot of these water sources. Where you can drill a well and maybe get 10 gallons a minute, that's not going to take care of larger operations at all. So
they're gonna have to draw from somewhere else or out a different. Yep.
Continued nutrient management, all of those sorts of things. A lot of the programs that are being developed to reward farmers for carbon sequestration, unfortunately, aren't going to reward those who have already undertaken the practice, and that's a mistake. They're going to reward the late to the partiers rather than the
Same on the town level for the shared services. We do a lot of shared services already that we can't get credit for. It's like we really can't do anymore because we're so shared out.
same idea.
And you don't get credit for what you already done. And it's the same boat.
We just came from SAF, Joe and I did, and the carbon is what it's all about. I totally agree with it all, but what was interesting is they're talking about carbon programs you can get into for forestry, and you just nailed it. County land, state land, it's not eligible. You know why? You're already doing a great job in sequestering all that carbon, so we're not going to pay you for what you're already doing. We want where you're over harvesting or harvesting really hard, and if you can back off your harvesting, then we'll pay you to back off your harvesting. So you're right. They've got to look at a way to pay those other people that are already doing the practice.
If you don't maintain the good stuff you've got, you're going to lose it.
You're gonna go backwards because they're gonna say, heck with it. I'm gonna go ahead and go this way, and then they'll go ahead and pay you for it.
I mean, a lot of the practices, there's good economic reasons to do it. But some of them you do just for the environment too. So, certainly cost sharing to implement those kind of projects and, manure management, storages and those sorts of things. A lot of time, with a lot of these practices, whether you're talking about no-till or manure injection, equipment costs a lot of money. And to make the transition can be very costly.
This is off topic, but I'm gonna pick the brain because we got a minute. So you got covered in the digester. How do we get everybody to do that? How do we come up with a
Do
plan?
what?
to cover those manure storages? I mean, how do you incentivize that?
And I don't know.
You know?
It was a good idea when we did it, but, you get little cost, prove to them that it's an economic savings by not having to, spread all that rainwater.
Mhm.
It's one way and,
Does it work? Was it a positive economic thing for you or a negative or neutral?
the cover itself was a neutral or a positive. Trying to flare the gas is terrible
It's terrible.
and we're not doing.
Because why is that? Why is
It's
it?
because of the technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the cost.
Gotcha.
Same as operating the digester, 10 years in, we've run it. The controls are obsolete. To upgrade it, it's gonna be $1.5 million.
That's right.
And I'm only using $700 to $8,000 in electricity. So it's gonna take a long time to pay for it, just on electric.
So that's a tough one. Yep, I know it's carbon, but, online, looking ahead 15 years, what, have you got any emerging challenges in the Sandy Creek watershed that you're thinking of? Anybody?
Well, I think Doug, his topics are the key ones, manure storage, manure spreading. And interesting, I know that you can get grants for the manure storage. Wondering why you couldn't, they don't provide grants for that digester program that he has.
Yep.
Yep.
There are grants available right now. We've been approved for a couple of them. The first when we built the digester, we were about 60% cost covered by grants. And that was okay. We got some other benefits out of it. But the operation and maintenance cost ongoing was more than we ever anticipated. Benefits were not as good as we had thought they would be. And the challenge is right now, all of the money for digesters and that sort of thing is going to large digesters where they're going to convert the methane into renewable natural gas. And typically those are going to go to operations where they have 4,000 cows, or they can join farms together, do a community one of that size. It takes that kind of volume in order to justify the investment. But those are being done by non-agricultural companies because there's tax incentives and monies to make it pay. And the downstream impact of that may be something we want to think about 15 years from now. And I'm not sure what the unintended consequences might be.
How is your farm cow size wise increased since you actually put in that digester 10 years ago? Have you put a lot more cows on since that point?
The digester was designed for about 700 mature cows. We have about 900 now.
Okay.
At the time we built the digester in 2007, we were only at about 550 cows. So we have grown, but that's also been over 15 years too. And typically dairies double every 7 years if they're going to stay competitive.
Forestry? What do you see 15 years out, Bill? I'll be retired before
I'll probably agree. Keeping forests is, forests, they have a lot of participation. It's efficient, large forests being broken up into campsites, parcels that, in some cases, I think you're just having to give, obviously different uses. I mean, some clearing, just keeping that forests for as many of those areas forests as you can, will really assist with water quality.
Anybody else got anything else with question number 3?
I wasn't here for your other focus groups. I don't know if this already came up, but as far as the friends in the population, the Amish community and working with them. Did it already come up? Because I find sometimes when I go to my non-Amish farms, you know, and I'm driving there, I'll pass an Amish farm where there's practices going on that when I get to the non-Amish farm, they're like, well, did you see what you passed on the way here? Why am I trying to do a good job? Other folks in the community aren't. So that would just be a
That's a
concern
great
of mine
point.
and how to approach them and the fact that they probably don't take government money. I know they sign up for the ag assessment, but that's just a whole issue. It becomes more.
Probably the only bad barnyard I can think of. The Oxford area is the one just on the way to, yeah, is just what you're talking. We tried to work with them. It didn't work.
It's a challenge for sure.
I don't know as though, I don't see ag down in that southwest, in this area down. I don't see us losing that over. I don't think.
No, where the land has higher value, they typically
Don't get it right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of a helpful thing for us, but I know exactly what you're talking.
How big an issue is it here from a forest management standpoint? Is it really a deer management problem?
There's a huge deer management problem, especially down towards the lake, but you get up in that's what's neat about this. You get up Worth, Eastern Lorraine, Boylston, Redfield, Hickman, Montague. It isn't. They are in that 8 to 12 deer per square mile because they have to get off that hill. That's just the way it is. They don't all make it back.
That could be a real challenge when trying to establish forest buffers.
Right.
And deer.
The hammer right here. Now, in Doug's area, they're a huge problem. From here west, you won't get regenerated unless that's what I'm talking about. Unless you're deliberate, and I mean, you got to put fencing up. Deer over somehow and make sure you're getting the species you regenerate back. You won't get regeneration. If you look at a lot of the forests down around, look, they were all hard maple. This is a sweet spot for like a Dutchess lumber. This is some of the they call it Lake Plains hard maple, some of the best in the state. It comes out of there, small of the hearts. So if you look at what's regenerating back, it's not hard. It doesn't have a chance. So
15, 30, 60 years from now,
that's a huge problem. It's a huge ecosystem. How is it all going to work? Because the species that work, this is all beech birch maple forest. Well, beech disease makes it a beech forest. Maple isn't regenerating back well. A little better over in here, actually. Got just one of the why they get along the matter, but they get some great regen up there. That's how you know that. They get regeneration up there.
There's lots of forest past out there too that are really maybe threatening. Forest too, from the plate algae, number and even longhorn beetle, and even there's a new one every day it seems. And
and then we have invasive species. I mean, like I said, that spot that I was talking about, it's like right up here, and this is no man's land. There's no houses, there's no roads, nothing here. There's Phragmites in the middle of the bean pond up there. How to get here? Got here because somebody was logging and they had it on their skin. There you go. Let's jump to 4. So if money wasn't an issue, none of us would be here. But if money wasn't an issue and you could pick some BMPs to put on your farm, what would you do if money wasn't an issue? If you see a beanie farmer down there, they said, "Get all the money in the world. Here you go." What would you see getting for you?
Well, probably it would go along the lines of manure management, rather it would be with, the digester technology, smaller farms where we might be able to, be producing more of our own energy. More remote storages so that they could be directly drag hosed and injected from those spots rather than there's a lot of manure that's getting top spread now because people don't have storage there and they're hiring trucks to haul it there. And rather they spread it with the trucks or overload it, it's just it's time. So manure maintenance is probably one of the bigger ones, certainly. No-till drills, repairing buffers along roadways. Of course, you're gonna compensate me for taking that land out of
Yep.
production.
Yep.
There's lots of those sorts of things that we could be doing, if money was no object.
Mhm.
We could even do a better job with our forests.
Yeah, all of us. Joe, what you got? If you had all the money in the world. I got regenerated.
More money. I mean, they have some money, but it's not the easiest money to find. Better.
Regeneration or reforestation. Jonathan worked in Tennessee and he worked with planting crews that were planting 300,000-400,000 seedlings within a week in a cutover area. So I'm not talking with them by hand. And I think we've got to look at that down the road. If we're not getting regeneration, and there's some issues we're talking with some college professors out there that they're seeing this problem all across the state that even when you do everything right, they have a hard time getting hard. They get the hard maple and then a year or two later it dies off. So there's some moisture problems. We may have to look at.
And that's in areas where they had harvest.
Yeah.
Is it a climate thing?
Yeah, he thinks it's climate change, and he thinks what's happening is, and I had it up east, I had a beautiful stand of hard maple regen, it was a blanket, and within 2 years it was gone. And that's because the sun comes in, dries it out, it's very, very wimpy in the summer in that drought condition. You get those drought periods, wipes it right out, so we might have to do something for actually planting, not that planting is gonna make it any less susceptible to drought, but we might have to change some species a little bit. Still staying in main family. Regeneration, we don't, that's why the state's spending so much money on regenerate New York. Anything on mind with number 4?
Lots of projects, if there was that much money available. I agree with Doug, the manure storage and the digester would be a great option, especially with all the neighbors down there with all that, they get a bunch of digesters. My God, they could power Oswego, by golly.
Shut the nuclear plant down.
There you go.
Multiple farms kind of getting together and have like on one big digester that they've all shared, is that? And
The challenge is the cost of moving.
Yeah.
You're moving a very bulky, heavy product and, it just, it sounds great until you get to the economics.
So the last question we'll hit and then open it for anything else is, so how willing are you to do BMPs, Doug, agriculturally, if there's cost share out there? I kind of know the answer. I've worked with you many times. I mean, what kind of cost share are you saying? Most of these projects I'm not touching. I spend 100% or 70%.
I mean, I think, it's gotta be something that tips the balance of the economic viability.
That's what comes down to. So you weigh it and say, I can do productivity in the end and make my money back, then I'll invest it. Otherwise,
I
in
think
business.
Certainly, eventually we get around to doing a lot of those things because they become economically viable. But if you want quicker adoption, you got to incentivize.
You got incentive.
Yeah.
Kind of like we're talking about that cover and flare. There's no money in it, so until they figure out how to incentivize it, why would they do it?
you had said, you put land into buffers, but you want to be compensated for taking that out of production. What if there was, a way could say, use willow and then like harvest that willow for biomass and still, willow kind of grows back year after.
I didn't think the state approved of bio.
They don't approve that, okay.
That's why RE Energy is closing. That's another question.
But they have, there is some ways to incentivize with, FSA and NRCS crap where they'll actually pay, but what's interesting, you probably know this, you get into other states, the land, because we spend a lot of time out west here on stuff. That CRP land out there, they're paying $400, $500, $600 an acre to farm to take that out of production. What is it, $12 an acre here? $9?
It's not,
It's not,
it's not feasible.
you look at it and go, I'm not gonna do it for that reason.
I can't set this acre aside for $12 or $50 an acre and then go 5 miles away. And if I can rent another acre of ground, pay 200.
Just only, yeah. Anything online?
Yeah, I think that, cost sharing options are wonderful. And I think that especially in terms of forest management and regeneration, they're extremely important. I think there's got to be some type of mixture between the size of the project and the regulations that they have to follow to get involved with it initially. As you mentioned, there's a lot of, the average size is 20 acres for all the landholders. If they could make some easy to access programs, cost sharing programs for folks that got 10-acre lots, improving those 10-acre lots certainly can help a lot down the road.
That's a really good point, Rick, right? Because Regenerate New York is just a super cumbersome program. And a 20-acre landowner wanting to plant an acre, not gonna do it. It's a nightmare versus,
Too much paperwork.
yep.
Well, and the other side of that is technical support. There isn't enough technical support on a lot of these issues to sell them, to help people implement them, whatever.
Nope, you're right.
From that perspective,
People don't know what's available a lot of times.
People don't know what's available a lot.
Right.
Or they don't have the technical expertise out there waiting, saying, here, I'll help you put that, I'll help you put that underground and do that. And you're right, and that's because that's an expense, so, yeah, but I think we could allow.
Doc brought up a good point, is he made a very large investment years ago that's very soon outdated. How do you manage that so it doesn't become outdated? I think that's the key, is to keep update and keep it affordable.
Yep, I think that's absolutely right.
It's a great idea, but you can't afford to manage. A very good definition is that the town of Bridgeland put in the windmill to help generate the cost for their water. O&M shut that windmill down because the cost of O&M doesn't outweigh the benefit to the people.
Yep, that's a huge, the reason why Shoulder Paper doesn't have a paper machine anymore is when I left, they had to invest $50 million in upgrade just to maintain that machine to be competitive at the same exact market. And economics said, we're not spending $50 million, that paper machine's now sitting in China. And you're right, same with Doug's, any of these things, they're expensive to maintain in the long run. And so, okay, it might have worked for 10 or 15 years, but eventually they wear out, and where's the money coming from to put it back in?
yeah, and every one of these practices, even riparians, you gotta do maintenance or you lose it.
Yep, exactly. It's 3 to 5 years minimum, exactly. Any of them we planning, we have 3 to 5 years worth of mowing and making sure the tubes are in place, and the stakes are in place, or you're gonna lose it. All right, anybody got anything else they want to add to this one? So thank you very much. Thanks for being online, guys. Thank you, Doug. For all your help. It was awesome. Thanks, and we'll have that follow-up final meeting, which is just Zoom, right? The 16th?
Yep.
Which I won't be doing. I'll do Zoom. I'll just teach you.
We can teach you.
There you go. And we'll have all these notes written up. They'll be on on the Tug Hill.
You'll be recording the Zoom too, right?
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
also gonna be traveling for it. Or the speaker show.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary, thanks for
Thank
having,
you.
thanks everybody online.
That it would have been way better.
Just my arm's stuck in.
Bye, guys.
Yep. See you.